Donna Knapp here. Welcome to ITSM Academy and to our first webinar of the new year, State of IT Service Management and what? Well, if you're new to ITSM Academy, we are a full service provider of IT service management related education. And that includes ITIL and DevOps and lean and value stream mapping, Agile service management, process design, and engineering related education, as well as employee experience. And that's really what I'm going to be talking about today, how all of these different ways of working are coming together and enabling organizations to be successful in what are very tough times. I'm the curriculum development manager here at ITSM Academy, and what I always like to say about my credentials, which you can see on the right-hand side, is that I'm very much a lifelong learner. I love learning about new ways of thinking and new ways of working, and I love sharing them with all of you. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start off just by talking about the post-pandemic landscape, and it's maybe a little inappropriate to say post-pandemic because I know that it's still swirling around us, but I think we've moved beyond the reactionary phase of the pandemic to the recovery phase. And what's that look like? For a lot of organizations, it means new business and operating models. And the key word here is digital. You've likely heard the statistics that organizations significantly accelerated their digital transformations in response to COVID-19. And as a result of that ability to accelerate, organizations realized, hey, we can go a lot faster than we thought we could. And so you're really seeing organizations starting to continuing to transform their business models and their operating models as a result of that. Remote and hybrid work is a reality for all of us. A focus on customer and employee experience is key today. Customer experience is very much a differentiator for organizations today. And one of the things to keep in mind is that during the pandemic, your customers maybe didn't have a lot of options. You know, organizations tended to choose a service provider, get themselves set up, and that's where they stayed for a while. But we're now coming into a phase where organizations are going to be looking around and questioning, are we getting the best service possible from our providers? And if not, what are our options? Employee experience is also very much key. You've likely read about the Great Resignation that began in 2021, where we saw people, employees within organizations really starting to rethink the type of company they wanted to work for, the type of work environment they wanted to be in. And organizations that are looking to attract the best and the brightest have to understand that today employee experience is key. And increasingly, and we're going to continue to see sustainability emerge as a competitive advantage. Organizations have really recognized that showing responsibility, not only in terms of how they protect the environment through their work practices, but also how they address things like human rights and concepts that really relate to ensuring that the decisions we're making today are going to not only enable our company to be successful, but we're potentially going to contribute to the world being better off as we go into the future. And I'll talk more about sustainability as I go along. So if this is sounding familiar to you, this is our reality today. And this landscape very much aligns with a recent survey done by IBM that looked at CEO priorities for the next 3 to 4 years. And they looked at outperformers. And what they mean by outperformers are those organizations that were able to thrive during the pandemic and that are continuing to thrive coming out of the pandemic and are even perhaps ahead of the curve coming out of the pandemic. So you can see that emphasis on customer experience, on building strong relationships is really top of mind for CEOs today. Improving efficiency. And I mentioned previously that organizations figured out they can move much more quickly than they thought they could in response to the pandemic. So how do we build on that? How do we continue to maximize those efficiencies? Increasing sustainability, 37%, and we'll continue to see that increase over the next several years, as well as driving innovation, both in terms of our business models. For some organizations, they introduced entirely new business models as a result of the pandemic. Maybe they were primarily dealing with physical stores and they now have a much greater online presence, or they introduced digital products that they really didn't have as part of their portfolio prior to that. As well as delivering innovation in the organization's products and services themselves. So how do we get there? Business success today really requires building a capabilities-based organization. So that kind of speaks to the idea of moving away from like these clearly defined, job descriptions where, there's that tendency for people to say, that's not my job. And really looking at what are the capabilities that people need in order to help the organization succeed. We need outcome-oriented teams. So we're not just focusing on outputs and producing, completing tasks and completing checklists, but we're delivering real value to our customers, to our organization. We're achieving the results that we set out to achieve within our organizations. So what are the capabilities that are needed? I found this report on the state of digital transformation, and I thought it was really interesting from the perspective that if you look at it, it talks about what are those age-old capabilities we think about, or, dimensions that we give consideration to: people, processes, technology, right? So putting in place those processes that let us adapt more quickly to change and enable agility across our organizations, implementing the technologies that let us move more quickly, really looking at our organizational structures and breaking down silos and adopting ways of working that enable people to collaborate more effectively, as well as the tools that enable us to collaborate more effectively. And again, new delivery models and channels, and hopefully it's obvious those delivery models and channels are digital. So adaptability, agility, resilience are really key capabilities that we need to develop today. So how do we get there? Let me say, first of all, we don't get there by waging framework wars. Those are just a distraction. They are just a waste of time. If you look at the highest performing organizations, what they're doing is really understanding and recognizing that no framework is perfect, no framework is complete. All these different frameworks and ways of working that we see in our organizations today: Agile, continuous delivery, DevOps, IT service management, they all have a role to play, and we need to leverage them in the appropriate context. We need to stop saying IT service management or DevOps and we need to look at right? IT service management and this particular image came out of SRE Foundation, Site Reliability Engineering Foundation, and I adapted it a tiny bit because in the original image, IT service management begins with build, right? Which is the traditional view of IT service management, that it's primarily an ops thing. if you understand IT service management, if you understand ITIL as a framework at all, you understand that it really spans the entire end-to-end IT value stream. And so it's important that we recognize that. It's important that we move away from that idea that it's just an ops thing. And I also adapted it by adding COVID into this conversation. And you may be sitting in an organization right now where you're experiencing this. Governance is back, and it's back in a big way for a few reasons. One is that, especially for larger enterprises, their auditors are now looking very, very closely at governance and really starting to focus on governance, risk, and compliance, and making sure that we're doing all the things that we need to be doing in order to be successful as an organization. The same can be said for federal and state government agencies. I recently spoke with Mark Thomas, who's really a thought leader in terms of COVID. And one of the things he shared with me is that in the past 18 months, he's heard more from federal and state agencies than he has even from enterprises. And it's because in those agencies, their internal auditors are starting to look at governance and are starting to encourage the different agencies to put in place governance frameworks. So again, the key is to understand that the best thing we can possibly do today is leverage any and all bodies of knowledge, but adopt and adapt them to meet our organization's circumstances and needs and goals. We don't want to be a slave to any one of these, but we want to embrace and recognize how they work together and the role, again, the role that they each play in the context of the end-to-end IT value stream. And you can see here from the 2021 DOI DevOps Institute upskilling report, the current level of adoption of these different ways of working, Agile and DevOps certainly at the top. ITIL 45%, and I suggest that once organizations really wrap their head around ITIL 4, we're really going to see that adoption of ITIL 4 expanding, because that's really the claim to fame of ITIL 4 is its alignment with these adjacent ways of working. So I know it's, not past noon yet, but for some of you, here's a little gift. I always get excited when I find new Deming quotes, and I just stumbled across this recently, this quote that says, long-term commitment to new learning and new perspectives is required of any management that seeks transformation. The timid and the faint-hearted and the people that want quick results are doomed to disappointment, right? Pretty profound, right? No one of these frameworks is a silver bullet. Again, no one of them is perfect. No one of them is complete. We have to look always at and understand always that this is about learning and continual improvement. So service management plays a critical role here. I spoke earlier that we need to develop a capabilities-based organization. And that's really what service management is about, right? It's the specialized organizational capabilities that we put in place for enabling value for our customers in the form of services. And ITIL as a framework provides guidance on IT service management. So how do we manage our IT services specifically? Very appropriate in the context of digital transformation. So all of those things that we need to be doing today, right? Creating positive customer and employee experiences, driving our digital transformation initiatives, addressing those governance and risk and compliance concerns, and perhaps most importantly, enabling the co-creation of value with our customers, really listening to our customers and making sure that we provide products and services that meet their needs is really what IT service management is all about. But I'm not talking about traditional IT service management. hopefully with ITIL version 3 being for the most part fully retired at this point, we're going to see this year organizations really embracing ITIL 4. And that doesn't mean like stop doing ITIL 3 and stop doing ITIL 4. It means really take a look at ITIL 4 and understand that it presents a very different perspective on IT service management. And it acknowledges some of the trends that we see happening with IT service management. Now, I just want to say, for those of you who attended this webinar last year, these trends haven't really changed. I, kind of sat and stared at them and fussed with them for a while, but really experience matters, right? Customer and employee experience are both critical. ITIL 4 is absolutely gaining acceptance as organizations recognize how it fits in, right, with all of the other frameworks that they're introducing. Enterprise service management is certainly gaining ground. Reducing toil and automation are critical activities, and we're learning how to focus on outcomes, and I'll talk more about that as I go along. Here's the bad news. Here's the trend that I would have liked to see that I could not find. Service management, maybe more particularly in specifically IT service management, is still viewed primarily as an IT thing. And more specifically, it's still viewed primarily as an ops thing. I was actually reading an article written by a Forrester analyst recently. And when that analyst referred to IT service management, they, as has always been the case through the years, said, it's about incident and problem management and change management, right? Like that traditional kind of view of what IT service management is all about, as opposed to understanding that it begins with strategy. It begins with understanding, right, how we build relationships within our organizations, how we manage our portfolios. It ends with value realization, and it spans everything in between. So it's way more comprehensive than just that traditional operational perspective that I think, people still, consider when they're talking about IT service management, and specifically when they're talking about ITIL. So we have lots of webinars where we talk about ITIL 4. I'm not going to belabor any points here. We've seen some real shifts in terms of, again, that focus on the co-creation of value, the recognition of the need to embrace value stream thinking and to align with these adjacent ways of working like Agile and Lean and DevOps. And I think one of the things that is always important to bring up is that it really introduces not only best practices, but also exploratory practices. If you keep in mind that best practices lag, right? It takes us a while to study and analyze and understand best practices. So to some extent, they represent a historical perspective. ITIL 4 brings forward, so for those of you who have, spent a lot of time and effort introducing, previous versions of ITIL, you've done education, you've done training, that was not in vain. Those best practices have been carried forward, but it also introduces exploratory practices, ways of working that you might not be ready for yet, but they're coming to your organization sometime soon. For those of you who are high performing organizations, maybe you're on the leading edge, you're going to see yourself in ITIL 4. You're going to see that ITIL very much reflects the types of things that you're doing. And again, this is some of what I'll talk about as I go forward. So what ITIL 4 does is introduce 4 characteristics that you see in high-performing organizations, and perhaps more specifically, organizations that have embraced high-velocity IT. And this particular slide is, in fact, from ITIL 4 High-Velocity IT, which I'm teaching February 15th through the 18th. Just hope some of you will be there. So what are those characteristics? Well, they include lean, agile, resilient, and continuous characteristics. And when we pull all those characteristics together, when we understand the essence of what those characteristics are all about, and I'll kind of let you read through the slide and understand what these characteristics are all about. But when we bring these together, we have that ability to co-create value with our customers and with our stakeholders. So let's talk about the state of these different characteristics. And I'm going to talk about Agile and Lean a little bit together because they share some common characteristics. Give me 1 second. So I love this quote from Pearl Zhu, who's an author. She's a thought leader in areas related to digital transformation. She says that doing Agile is a set of activities. Being Agile is a state of mind. And I think what's important to recognize about Agile is that it's a mindset, it's a skill set, and it's a tool set. And what we've learned over the last 10 years as DevOps emerged and as organizations struggled to really realize the return on investment in DevOps, which is rooted, by the way, in Agile and Lean, right? What they came to understand is it doesn't matter if only your IT department is introducing Agile, or and you can see the statistics here. If the only part of your organization that has embraced Agile is the software development teams within your organization, you're not going to see a return on that investment. You're optimizing locally, right? So you might get really, really good at developing software. But if the activities that are upstream from software development, how we plan projects, how we define requirements, how we fund initiatives, are still using traditional ways of working, right? Annual strategy setting sessions, annual budgeting cycles, right? It doesn't matter, right? Again, you're not going to realize the benefits of Agile. If the folks who are downstream from your software developers are working at a different cadence, again, you're not going to see the benefits. So we really today have to be thinking about enterprise agility. And that means that everybody in the organization is operating with the same mindset that's based on values, principles, and practices. Now, when we talk about values and principles here, probably the best place to go to understand what those values and principles are is the Agile Manifesto, right? So I'm going to give everybody a little homework assignment. If you haven't done it in a while, I encourage you to go take a look at the Agile Manifesto. And you might be familiar with the manifesto itself. That's that, we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, right? Those kind of 4 core values. But take a look at the 12 principles. One of the things that fascinates me about the 12 principles, and this is something I've come to over the past, couple of years, I think. Every once in a while I go back and I look at those principles. It's interesting to me how rooted the Agile principles are in Lean. You'll very much see Lean, right, when you look through those principles. So I encourage you to go back and take a look at them, and don't get hung up on the fact that they're talking about software, right? Don't worry about that, right? Just think about the principles and embrace what they're talking about. And the first principle, like the first principle in Lean, is really to focus on your customer, right? And focus on ensuring that you're providing value to your customers. In order to achieve enterprise agility, we also have to make sure that we're balancing control and autonomy. And that's just an ongoing struggle that organizations are going through right now. Traditional service management practices in particular have a really bad rap, right? Because they tended to be over controlling, and it's a throwback, right? It's a throwback when we used to do waterfall projects and when we used to have these big bang releases, right? But we've got to move on, right? We've got to adapt and understand, right? That with Agile, it's different, right? many of the concerns that we had with those traditional ways of working have been alleviated with Agile practices. I like this quote from the 2021 or the 15th annual State of Agile report, which came out in 2021. And I'm going to read it and then I'm going to remind you about it as we go forward. I would say that the #1 challenge facing capital A Agile, right, today is a lack of awareness of systems thinking. And the fact that we have all these teams and organizations who have adopted Agile and Agile frameworks like Scrum and SAFe and XP, extreme programming, they're doing so in only part of the system, right? So the same point there, that if only your software development team has embraced these Agile ways of working, right? It's unlikely that you're realizing the full benefits of that investment. Having said that, right, let's take a look at Agile practices and you know, what practices are in place in organizations today. You can see again from this same report that Scrum is very, very widely used, 66% of organizations. I think it's interesting that 9% are using Scrumban, which is basically a combination of Scrum and Kanban. And then you see some other, you know, different types of approaches being used in you know, slightly smaller increments. Again, Scrum is still the most widely used, and I would suggest in the context of software development. If we're talking about operations, for example, we might see Kanban being used more frequently. SAFe, if you're wondering where's SAFe on there, the report does speak to the fact that 37% of organizations are using SAFe to scale up their Agile practices. So in the spirit of, and Spotify kind of has this great quote, we would rather be Agile than do Agile, right? Recognize the fact that, again, it's not necessary to be a slave to Scrum practices, you know, or SAFe practices, you know, sometimes, and it's where we went wrong with Agile, you know, over the years, is we adopted this very rigid approach to how things are supposed to be done. Understand that when it comes to Agile, there's techniques and practices that we can introduce that let us be Agile, right? Stand-ups, retrospectives, sprint and iteration planning. So that whole idea of one of the big kind of key things about Agile is, right, chunking things up a little bit, doing smaller increments of work, not trying to do, you know, come up with the perfect solution, and until that perfect solution is complete, right, getting feedback. Let's get fast feedback as a result of those sprints and iterations, right? That's part of what sprints is all about, fast feedback. And then certainly using things like Kanban boards and task boards. And the key there is just to make the work visible. Make sure everybody understands what's going on. Make sure that everybody's priorities are clear, that we don't have a situation where we've got way too many balls in the air and we're not really getting anything done. Let's, you know, start finishing and getting stuff done. So Agile, and again, if you go back and look at the Agile principles, you'll very much see that it embraces lean thinking. So if we think about lean, we can say the same thing. It is a mindset, it is a skill set, and it is a tool set. And when we think about lean as a mindset, you see the 5 principles of lean thinking, really focusing on value and understanding that value is defined from the perspective of our customers, mapping out our activities within the context of a value stream, looking to minimize or eliminate, if possible, activities that aren't contributing to value, and then making those remaining activities flow, optimizing the flow of value through our organization, and using pull systems that enable our customers to define what's important and enabling our teams to pull work as they have the capability to complete that work. And then you see the pursuit of perfection. And it's always important to emphasize, and Deming talks about this as well, that we don't achieve perfection through controls and through inspections. We build quality in, we continuously improve. So it is the pursuit of perfection with the understanding that we're never going to quite get there, but we're going to keep trying. And then with Lean, you see a lot of methods and techniques, which you're probably already familiar with. And maybe you just didn't recognize that they were a Lean technique. One of the things that is important to understand about these different techniques is that some of them are really designed just to enable continual improvement. The Deming PDCA cycle as an example, right? It's designed to help you make incremental improvements. Some are designed to help you make pretty dramatic improvements where they are in fact needed. And value stream mapping is an example of that, right? What value stream mapping does is, as you can see in the principles of lean thinking, it brings your activities, makes your activities visible, the flow of information and work across your organization, it makes that visible, and it enables you to really understand where your constraints are, where there's opportunities to eliminate waste, and how you can improve flow. And it can be, again, it can be very, very dramatic. And it's very much a necessity in those organizations that are undergoing things like, maybe organizational restructuring as, they move to something like value stream or product-oriented teams. So value stream mapping is one of those techniques that we saw the DevOps community really embracing. And now as we move forward with the introduction of value stream management, it is an activity that really, again, helps you to kind of understand, right, what work looks like in your organization, but it's hard. And that's kind of what this slide shows. It's just hard, right? The Value Stream Management Consortium asked organizations, why don't you leverage value stream mapping, right? And the top 3 reasons are, we don't know how, right? We just, we don't know what it is. We can't get the sponsorship we need, right? We can't get the stakeholders together, right? It's tough. But it's critical for those organizations that really today want to optimize flow and want to be able to reap the benefits of value stream management. So what is value stream management? Value stream management is very often referred to as the next generation of DevOps. It is in fact where the highest performing organizations are today. And I'm going to read this definition just because it's a bit of a mouthful. Value stream management is a combination of people, process, and technology that maps, optimizes, visualizes, measures, and governs business value flow through heterogeneous enterprise software delivery pipelines. That's a lot, right? What value stream management does is really help you take that value stream map and codify it, and then continually monitor the performance of your value streams. We're seeing the emergence of value stream management platforms that are really helping organizations, not only within IT, but across the enterprise, really monitor the flow of value and really be able to recognize, do we actually see a return on the investments that we're making? You can see Gartner by 2023, 70% of organizations would use value stream management to improve flow, leading to faster delivery of customer value. So I'm not going to read the details of this particular slide. You can come back and take a look at it. But value stream management is really the human-centric aspect of understanding how we work together across an end-to-end value stream. And traditionally, it's done in a workshop setting, and it really helps us to understand, right, what the flow of work is today, and also helps us start to create a vision of what it can look like in the future. What if we can minimize our constraints? What if we can optimize flow? What would it look like? Value stream management is more of a tool-centric approach. Again, it's very much a platform approach, and it's data-driven. Now, this isn't going to replace, for those of you who have DevOps tool chains where you have these, all these integrated tools, and you're thinking, does this kind of replace our DevOps tool chain? No, it actually kind of is an overarching platform that lets you take the data that's coming out of all, this myriad of tools that makes up your DevOps tool chain, what Gartner refers to as value stream delivery platforms, and really then look at that data and understand what the flow of information and work is across your organization. Artificial intelligence and machine learning come into play here. So what happens initially is organizations use approaches like value stream mapping, right, to kind of understand what is their current state, what do they want their future state to look like. And then they, again, codify that in these value stream management platforms, and then use the platform going forward in order to monitor and improve how they're doing. Now, how do we know value stream management is emerging? Well, we're very much starting to see organizations that are establishing value stream centric teams or product oriented teams. So we've seen in the last several years the project to product movement occurring within organizations. And we're also starting to see some roles emerge, value stream owner, value stream architect, right? As organizations start to look at how do we enable people to work effectively within these value stream centric teams. Now, what does that translate into? It really translates into flattening the hierarchies within our organization. So we're moving away from traditional command and control ways of working. We're breaking down silos within a product-oriented team. You will tend to have, right, individuals who have the capabilities that span the end-to-end value stream, so dev and ops and quality assurance and security, right? You have kind of all of those capabilities are represented within that team. And we also see now systems thinking, right, that focus on the end-to-end life cycle. So remember that little quote I said I'd come back to with Agile, right? When you focus on Agile with a capital A, in other words, you make it about Scrum or you make it about SAFe, right? Then you're probably optimizing locally, right? You have some development teams who've gotten really good at those specific methods, whatever they are choosing to use, but we're not necessarily thinking about it in the context of the end-to-end value stream. So we really, from an Agile and lean perspective, need to think about enterprise agility and lean enterprise. And again, recognize that the mindset shift has to occur across the entire enterprise. So what's the state of value stream management? And this is from the 2021 State of Value Stream Management report. You see that in the highest performing organizations, they're using value stream mapping. And perhaps more importantly, they're measuring value and the flow of value across their organizations. And they're looking to measure outcomes. And this is, remember, one of the trends I spoke to is we're getting better at measuring outcomes. It's sometimes challenging, right? Organizations can introduce a new feature, for example, into their product, and it takes a while to understand what the customer experience was with that particular new feature. Does that new feature really enable the customers to achieve the outcomes that they want to achieve? So what value stream management is going to help us do, and part of how it's going to do it is by integrating also in our customer experience management systems. It's going to enable us to, I hope, I'm going to be optimistic here, kind of cross that finish line and really learn how to connect the dots, right? From the decisions that we're making in terms of investing from an IT perspective to whether or not they do, in fact, contribute to the goals of the organization and enable value realization for customers. And we're not quite there yet. You can see the other part of this study that I pulled in when Value Stream Management Consortium asked, do you measure the actual value realized by new features in your products? Notice that kind of a significant percent said rarely or once or never, right? So a very small percentage is really looking at that idea of value realization, but time to value has become critical for organizations, even perhaps more critical than time to market. So again, we're getting there, and this is a way of working that I think is going to help us. Now, we're in this funny place now, aren't we, right? Where we're kind of emphasizing the need for innovation, the need to embrace new ways of working. But as happens with any kind of continual improvement, you come to a point where you realize, okay, this is actually best practice, right? And now we want to start to standardize. We want to start to normalize those best practices within our organization. But I love this quote, right? When we think about standardization as the foundation on which we're going to build tomorrow's improvements, right? We're in good shape. But if we think about standards as confining, then progress is going to stop. So understand that, right? That best practices, right, have a lifespan. And at some point, new ways of working are going to emerge, and we want to embrace those new ways of working. It's where we are, right now. And at some point, those new ways of working will become the way we've always done things. And then we begin that cycle again. So one of the things, and maybe y'all can set a little New Year's resolution for yourself. I want you to check yourself if you ever find yourself saying, well, it's the way we've always done things, right? Because one of the things I think we have to be willing to do today is always kind of look for, right, what's new. Resilient ways of working really help us think with things like availability and performance. And that's where we're seeing approaches like site reliability engineering, chaos engineering, observability, AI ops. And for some organizations, really looking at how to pay down technical debt, or hopefully going forward, limiting technical debt. So site reliability engineering, how we take a engineering approach to our IT infrastructure and operations activities, is up significantly. In 2022 or in 2021, it was 22% as opposed to 15% in 2020. And I expect that we're going to continue to see a big uptick in site reliability engineering. It took a very similar trajectory to DevOps. It was first embraced by the Googles and the Facebooks, right? And the Etsy's. It was in fact, right, the term was coined by Google, and then it found its way into enterprises. And that's where we are now. We're in this phase of enterprise adoption. 47% of survey respondents in the DOI 2021 upskilling report voted SRE skills as must-have skills. And if you're not familiar with SRE, it's really Google's approach to service management. It's a very, very modern approach to IT service management. But it doesn't have, one single definitive, there's not one single definitive approach to SRE. You can see here from the 2021 SRE report that in some organizations, right, it's very decentralized, right? Maybe SREs And one of the things that makes SRE interesting is it's both a discipline and a role. So you may hear me kind of refer to it in either one of those ways. In some organizations, it's decentralized, right? They're embedded into business lines of business, or they're embedded into platform teams. In other organizations, they have a centralized SRE team. In some, it's a little mix and match. So again, it's like any of these approaches where a one size fits all approach is just not not the key to success in the dynamic world we live in today. So we've talked about agile, lean, and resilient characteristics. So last but not least, continuous characteristics. And continuous characteristics are most closely associated with DevOps. So it's those characteristics like continuous integration, continuous testing, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, continuous monitoring. I saw a article recently that said DevSecOps is out, continuous security is in, right? So, right, it's that idea that rather than having ever, kind of our traditional long-term planning approaches and these big bang releases, we're going to make small, continuous, incremental changes, small, frequent batches of work. We get feedback faster, it's safer, right? The impact of our changes are minimized. So where are we with DevOps and DevSecOps? Well, there are absolutely some organizations that are still getting started with DevOps, just like there's some organizations that are just getting started with their digital transformations. Some are in the planning stage. 16% are, maybe working on a, initial pilot project. A lot of the organizations, and remember DevOps is, I think 11 years old now. I think that at this point, the term was coined 11 years ago. For some organizations, they've introduced it at, for particular applications or for particular projects, which is absolutely appropriate. Other organizations are now looking at how do we scale this across our organizations. So it very much varies, right, where organizations are in terms of DevOps. And, DevSecOps is also being widely embraced. You can see, in both the US and UK, according to this particular State of DevSecOps report, we're in the upper 70% adoption rate in terms of DevSecOps. Now, something I find really interesting, and this comes out of the 2021 Puppet State of DevOps report, is that they really focused in this year, in the 2021 report, and this was the 10th anniversary of the State of DevOps report, they really focused at looking at and trying to understand why are there are a lot of organizations that are, and this is their phrase, stuck in the middle of their DevOps transformations. And you can see, right, it's a significant percentage, 78% are kind of stuck in the middle. So they're not necessarily low performing. They kind of put in place a lot of the foundational activities, version control, continuous integration, continuous delivery, that sort of thing. But they're not high performing either. So why is that? Why are these organizations stuck in the middle? What this study found is that when you look at these organizations that are stuck in the middle, very often what they're dealing with are cultural challenges, right? Maybe initially it has to do with technology implementation, but that's actually resolved relatively quickly. It has to do with, right, the cultural issues. So some of the things we've been talking about, right, not having those good fast feedback loops, not sharing best practices, not having the organizational buy-in, right? So they're trying to do DevOps within IT, or even worse, within Dev, which is very often what happens. We're not even engaging the ops folks. We don't have that across the organization buy-in. So we're still using traditional planning practices. We're still using traditional requirements definition practices. We're still using traditional release management practices, right? So upstream and downstream, right? We've not bought into what DevOps is all about. We have maybe an overly risk-averse culture, or maybe we're simply, again, still a traditional siloed organization. So what's getting in the way of these organizations? It's structural barriers. And here's where you see organizations, again, trying to break down those hierarchies and moving to more, at a minimum, cross-functional teams and in the more advanced organizations, product-oriented teams. Cultural inhibitors, and you see cultural inhibitors listed here, and understand that, you know, culture really relates to our behaviors and how we interact within our organizations, what our values are, what our belief systems are. So, you know, for organizations that are overly risk averse or that have a failure is not an option culture, you're going to see real resistance here. You're going to see real fear, right, of DevOps ways of working. Process challenges, and IT service management has to step up and take responsibility for the fact that we've got to adapt our processes and embrace Agile and Lean and DevOps ways of working in those processes. We've got to kind of step away from these traditional controls-based, approval-based, inspection-based bureaucratic processes. And then certainly technology challenges along the way. So where do we go from here? Shigeo Shingo, who is really one of the, is kind of widely recognized as the leader in terms of introducing the Toyota production system and what we now know as lean manufacturing practices, says that a relentless barrage of whys is the best way to prepare your mind to pierce the clouded valve of thinking caused by status quo, right? So another homework assignment for you. If you experience a pain point, if you experience a constraint, right? If you find that some activities seem slow and laborious or bureaucratic, right? Ask yourself why. Why do we work this way? Why did we establish this process the way we did? Is it based on some outdated way of thinking? And if we embrace new ways of thinking and working, we can then adapt that process or adapt that practice going forward. So challenge the status quo. Embrace the ITIL 4 guiding principles. Start now, start where you are, progress iteratively with feedback. Establish a culture of continuous improvement and learning and experimentation. And you can see on the right the characteristics of high-performing organizations. Really understand what's important to your organization. Recognize that today we've got to master technology, and specifically digital technology, and understand how it does in fact change the game in terms of how we put in place our practices and our processes. We have to invest in speed, make our customers a priority, and be proactive. And we, each and every one of us, has to hone our skills. And the DevOps Institute Upskilling Report talks about the need to look at not only things like technical skills and functional skills. In other words, I'm a database administrator, or I'm a system administrator, but also in general, process and framework skills, understanding how all these different ways of working relate to each other and can work together. Automation skills, and certainly human skills. So this is something we've been talking about a lot in the last couple of years, recognizing the need to upskill employees and prepare our employees to enable our organization going into the fourth, or not even going into, in this digital age. And I thought this State of CIO report was very interesting, because one of the things it says is, first of all, when you're thinking about reskilling, think about what skills are needed, not only now, but going into the future. Offer tailored learning opportunities. So that really involves understanding, right? human capabilities and human interests, and putting people into positions and providing them with the skills that are going to enable them to be successful, right? Not trying to, fit people into roles that don't suit their temperament. And evaluating from there what works and what doesn't. Look not only at the skills that are in demand. So it's easy to talk about, we need cloud skills, or we need AI skills, or we need, right, digital skills. But also look at the skills that are lacking, the human skills, organizational change management, strategy building, right? That ability to think, right, about kind of the bigger picture and how we can contribute to the bigger picture in our organizations. So foster a culture of continual experimentation and learning. And for that can apply at the from an organizational perspective, right? Thinking about education and learning and taking a strategic approach to how you educate your workforce. But it can also apply to us as individuals, right? And kind of embracing lifelong learning. We talked about the need for those human skills, and you see here from the State of DevOps report, the kind of top human skills that we need to take into consideration, and these are somewhat age old. I think what's a little bit different here is that historically in IT, we maybe let people get away with not having those human skills, and those days are very much gone. And then last but not least, think about sustainability. I mentioned previously that sustainability is, you're going to hear a lot about in the coming years. It's going to be very much viewed as a competitive advantage in organizations. McKinsey, a recent McKinsey report spoke to the fact that in the very near future, focusing on sustainability will become as fundamental to doing business as compiling a balance sheet, right? It's something that really has to be looked at from a strategic standpoint. And I'm excited that part of the expansion of the IDLE 4 portfolio that occurred in 2021, I had to think about what year this is, last year, is the introduction of the IDLE 4 specialist certification, sustainability in digital and IT. And again, what it does is speak to sustainability and the role it's going to play as organizations introduce, digital business models and digital operating models. Now, when you hear the word sustainable, you're not alone if you kind of go to environment, right? Because very often that's, viewed as synonymous. And we hear a lot about, environmental social governance or ESG today. But the new IDLE 4 sustainability course actually leverages the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And you can see them listed here if you Google UN Sustainable Development Goals. You can find a lot of great information out there about them. But notice that it goes way beyond just thinking about the environment. It really thinks about the human condition. How do we make sure that the actions that we're taking today create a better future, right, for the generations to come, that we leave the world a better place than how it is today. And that includes, right, again, thinking about the human condition. And if you think about, again, increasingly, you're seeing consumers, right, start to vote based on, right, organizations' commitment to sustainability. You see consumers starting to boycott companies that are manufacturing their products in parts of the world where they exploit labor or they don't, have fair trade practices. And that's very much going to continue. This is very much a think globally, act locally situation. I personally am on a committee within my city. As a citizen, I am on a committee that is tied to the sustainability goals of my personal city. So you can think about sustainability in the context of where you work, in the context of where you live, in the context of how you live your personal life. So very, very excited about that new addition to the portfolio. So if you want to learn more, right, please reach out. This is what we do, right? What we do at the Academy is try to help organizations understand how all these different ways of working fit together. And we very much, very quick shameless plug, very much want to get to the education you need when you need it. And that doesn't mean everything has to be a certification class. We have a whole series of key concept class. If really you just want to embrace, what are the key concepts of Agile? What are the key concepts of Lean? We can help with that so that you pick, tailor, right? We talked about that tailored educational offering, right? So that you can have, you know, the broadest, have individuals who have the broadest understanding possible of all these different ways of working and how they fit together. Whew. Lisa,
Hugh
are there any questions?
I have to say, Donna, that you did warn us that you thought you might have not that it was overpacked, but we didn't leave but a moment for Q&A. But I do happen to know that Donna Knapp can stay on with you guys. So if you do have any questions, first of all, we're almost at the top of the hour. Unbelievably, that felt like 20 minutes to me. As always, thank you guys so much for joining us. I just was looking through the attendee list, and boy, do we have some longtime friends and family here with us today, which is always really awesome. But if you do have any questions, please pop over from the chat, which I know we've been using a little bit, into the Q&A section icon itself so that we can answer them through there. I do see some questions coming in, Donna. Oh, just very quickly, next month's webinar will be on February 17th, and it will be a practitioner roundtable on digital employee experience. More details on that coming soon. And the first question, will you be adding the Agile sustainability course to your catalog?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that one's asked and answered. Any other questions for Don? That was easy.
I am going to say, if I have my way, we in the next 2 weeks we're doing our planning for our content development calendar for this year. But as Lisa Schwartz knows, I've been lobbying since day one to add this to our portfolio, and I think it's a really good fit for our portfolio. I think it's a good fit with for any of you who have attended digital and IT strategy, for example. I think sustainability is a good next step for you all because there's very much a relationship there. This is kind of very much kind of a strategic perspective on sustainability. And so I vote yes, Lisa. Hopefully everybody else will as well.
Well, and I think on a personal level, it's kind of a competition between Donna and I, who hugs the tree harder. So we just love the idea of sustainability. And it's one of the reasons that we're so excited with the success of our learner portal, because we've been able to move everything digital, and our carbon footprint is a lot smaller than it used to be, and that makes both Donna and I very happy.
Yes.
So that, I think it might be a pondering situation, Donna, because that was very comprehensive and it covered a lot of different things. You might know that, you were kind of there for it. So you guys, if you have any follow-up questions, as always, feel free to use the chat function on our website. It's a great way to get to the team. You can send in emailed questions if you'd like further clarity on anything. Just really reach out to any of us in any way, and we'll make sure that we get back to you in a really full answer. We're always, as Donna said, we're always here to really help, not just provide certification training, but to help organizations move forward with a whole education path that's sustainable. I had to do it. Sorry.
And I would like to hear from people, like, does this resonate with you? Like, does it acknowledge your pain, right? Because I think this is all very much a struggle. I think organizations are really struggling with all of this stuff. And I think what's very fascinating, equally fascinating, and I'm sure, phenomenally challenging for organizations today is they're all over the place with this, right? Some organizations are just getting started with digital transformation or an agile transformation. Some organizations have made the move to product-oriented teams. Even if you have, especially in the context of an enterprise, even if you have product-oriented teams from a software development standpoint, you probably still got a centralized IT department, right? That's managing your legacy systems, your communication systems, right? It might be a smaller central IT department than it was before, but it still exists in some way, shape, or form. And maybe you've got some, activities where you've got project teams who are working in agile ways. They're not maybe part of the product-oriented team. So how do you adapt to that, right? So understanding that one size fits all is not the answer, right? Recognizing for IT service management professionals that how you handle IT service management activities in product-oriented teams is in fact going to be different than how you would handle it in a central IT organization where maybe there's still some waterfall projects coming in. So you kind of recognizing, right, to kind of adapt accordingly is phenomenally challenging. It's, I think, an interesting time to be an IT service management professional, because we really do have the opportunity if we adopt the right mindset, right? And if we focus on continually learning and experimenting, right? We have an opportunity to make a real contribution to our organizations. So I'd love to hear from you if that resonates with you. The challenges and the opportunities, right? If that resonates with you.
And Donna, also, you probably didn't see this, but during the chat, there were hashtag Donna said Deming. You got us twice. We appreciated it.
I was going to say, I threw a few of them in for you.
Yeah, that was awesome. So don't have any other questions coming in at this point. So, thank you guys all again for joining us. We love having you come to our webinars and kind of our Ripped from the Classroom series. Donna, thank you so much. Great presentation. I learned a lot, and that's a beautiful thing. So I will talk to you soon.
Thanks all. Happy New Year.
Bye all.